Alright, so I'm going to be going through the Scarlet and Violet coaches and look at the teams that everyone's drafted based off of sort of first impressions and just what I see, and ranking them, hopefully. So, first off is the Philadelphia Polytoads, and this is a threatening team. Its real biggest issue kind of got corrected through the trades, I think. I think of the fact that they have some more speed now, because they didn't really have great ways of consistently making sure they go first, outside of like Iron Hands Fake Out and Salaman's Tailwind. But some of these later picks also provide an option, like Gliscor gets Tailwind too, and Hypno gets Trick Room, but I really don't think that. I mean, it's Fake Out immune with Inner Focus, but I don't think it's going to be doing too much. It's pretty frail. It gets good utility though. Like I know it gets Thunder Wave, yeah, and so I mean it gets screens, but it's not really a mon that does a whole lot for the team, especially considering the team's very Ghost weak. Like if you bring Ghost, you hit all of these four for neutral. So if you have like a boosted Ghost type, you can kind of just sweep through, like someone who has Spectria, for example. I don't know that anyone does, but like a Fluttermane is a huge issue for this team actually. Because Booster Energy Fluttermane, with speed boosting nature, outspeeds everything except for Scarfed Barraskewda if they don't get Tailwind up. And you can pretty easily stop Tailwind from going up with this team. Or you can set your own Tailwind up, but I'll get to that later. So it's very, very Ghost weak. Rocks I wouldn't be worried about with these two. These two are very strong together. Ogerpon Water, always good, very bulky. These two, in general, I mean, Iron Hands usually runs Assault Vest, so it's pretty specially defensive, and Ogerpon, if it terastallizes, is also especially defensive, and then you got Intimidate to lower the opponent's attack stats, so it's a pretty bulky core here, but everything else out here, minus Gliscor, is not bulky, pretty much whatsoever. Like, Cryogonal has decent special defense, but it doesn't have HP to back it up, I don't think. So, and it doesn't really do much with it. It has like 90-something special attack, I think. Barraskewda is good to avoid redirection. Ogerpon, very versatile, can be extremely offensive, or can be more supportive, bulky, like I said, with the special defense stuff, but generally you're going to run like Swords Dance or things. I mean, you may see some interesting things with like maybe running Grassy Glide against Brelooms too, because it's, you know, got Rillaboom, but I mean, for the most part, these three, you know what they're doing. Salamence can be a little bit more versatile. It has good options in both physical sets and special sets, and it has some decent support, primarily through Tailwind and Intimidate. I don't know of any other moves that it gets that are really supportive outside of that, though. Cinderace is interesting. I'd be interested to see if he utilizes Court Change at all, which can steal Tailwind or screens or anything. I think it steals screens. I don't know. I'd have to look into that, but it's a neat Pokemon, and it's unique in its ability to keep Libero for a turn if it uses something like Pyro Ball or a Fire type move, because it's already Fire type. It doesn't actually activate until the turn that it needs to. But at the same time, it gets turned into a normal type if you use Protect turn 1. I mean, it's in a weird spot right now, ever since the Protean Libero nerf. Gliscor's cool, pretty great. Taunt, Tailwind Spikes, Toxic Spikes, Knockoff. Very, very good utility and incredibly bulky with like Poison Heal, investing in defense. You can probably run it as a physical attacker with Hypercutter if you're like afraid of Intimidate, but I wouldn't. But overall, very solid, even if centric around these Pokemon here. I'd say there are several different ways to run this team. I don't think there are too many. I think it's fairly one trick. Like, I think if you can prep for these guys, you prep for these guys, and you kind of just win. I think it's very Ghost weak. Yeah, but outside of that, I mean, it's a great team. I would expect nothing less from first pick in draft. So we'll go ahead and rank this one. I would say it's between S and A for me. So the only reason I'm not putting it like in S firmly is just because of how basically mandatory it is to bring those four every time. But they're also really good together and they cover each other. It's not like they're like a Sun team that has a major, weakness to ground or opposing fire or opposing weather or whatever. So it's like I would say high A, low S. I'll put it in S tier for now. But then NYL, another incredible team. In this time, actually has a ton of versatility with so many Pokemon. Like Lurantis with Contrary is pretty decent. I think it got superpower back in the DLC, which it desperately needed. So it can run a physical set that boosts its own defense. It can also run Leaf Storm, boost its own special attack. It can do several different things. Slowking, really strong Trick Room setter just because Oblivious blocks Taunt. It's decent outside of that with Regenerator, but for the most part, I think it'll be running Oblivious. Goodra is really good value. So Goodra mainly going to be running Sap Sipper, but that's very good insurance for things like Amoonguss or anything that... I mean, Amoonguss isn't drafted, I don't think, but... any opposing grass types or any like specially offensive thing, like look at this thing, it has 150 base special defense with 90 HP. Like it just lives every special attack. Don't quote me on that, but the only thing that could like potentially one-shot it on the special end is also on the same team. And like I was talking about with this team, like Fluttermane is incredibly impressive, and like seeing this type spread makes me very jealous here, because there's so little that you can like point out that like, oh yeah, this team is weak to blank. Like it just doesn't exist. There's a lot of, I mean, there are several Pokemon that are weak to ice, for example, but no one really has a good ice type. And at the same time, you don't really want an ice type into something like Copperajah or, Tauros, or especially Scizor. So overall, very balanced. Kilowattrel, insane value. Goodra, insane value. Swanna does some things. Really just gets Tailwind, Icy Wind. I'd have to look into it, but it doesn't do much. Persian Alola, also good value, though. It gets Fluffy, or not Fluffy. Fur coat, I think. So it should get double special defense. So it's actually pretty decently bulky. It's like an Incineroar that's fast, but less bulky, and without the fire type. So it gets Fake Out, it gets Parting Shot, it gets Snarl, It doesn't have the same attack stat as Incineroar, so it's like things like Flare Blitz coming off of it. It's not as immediately threatening, but it has a ton of utility and support. Kilowattrel, anti-intimidate, good Tailwind setter. Wind Power is very interesting. Competitive is very good as an anti-intimidate. Volt Absorb, if you really need it. This team doesn't, but like it has it. Tauros Blaze, coming off the back of last season with both Fluttermane and Tauros here, but Tauros was water last season. I think this is a good Pokemon. I think it's balanced. I think it's just an Intimidate user that has strong attacks and it can break through screens, which is very good for these two, especially in Scizor, because like this team has good, incredible offense, but can also be really bulky. So having Tauros to break screens whenever you want to run offense or Intimidate when you want to run defense, that's all good. Fluttermane is Fluttermane, incredibly good. So many different sets. Most of the time you're going to be running Booster Energy, and you kind of have to EV around some things to hit speed tiers and hit, Pokemon that you want to. But for the most part, I mean, that, Pixie Plate, Choice Specs, Focus Sash sometimes, maybe. Just a very good Pokemon. Ursaluna, I have no words other than Slowking, Copperajah, Ursaluna is just very strong. Very good Trick Room team. In all honesty, this team is kind of weak to Intimidate, but not really. Like, its heavy hitters are all kind of weak to Intimidate, except for Fluttermane. And I guess Goodra, if you want to count Goodra, but like, yeah, no. So for the most part, I mean, all the heavy hitters are like, Cabraja, Ursaluna, Scizor, Tauros, kind of, yeah. Like, for the most part, I mean, it's a little weak to Intimidate, which this one kind of is too, but not many people have Intimidate, actually, in the Scarlet Violet League. And Goldango's kind of good. Gliscor's somewhat preventative. Swords Dance helps prevent it. Ursaluna gets Swords Dance too, but there's no redirection. Like, it's not... Like, Ogerpon can redirect for, like, an Iron Hand Swords Dance or Goldango Nasty Plot. Like, very easy to set up with this team, but, like, here it can be a little more difficult, I think. So I think setup isn't going to be as prominent, but I think just the sheer bulk on a lot of these Pokemon is pretty scary. So it'll be hard to find a way to break through this team, even if they end up just having to whittle you down. Yeah, I think this team is very good. I think this team is easily S tier. Like, I talk bad about things because I'm trying to poke holes in it, but it's an amazing team. I think it's more versatile. I think it can run Tailwind. I think it can run Trick Room. I think it's more versatile, and you don't know as much of what they're going to bring, and it doesn't have as obvious as weaknesses. So I think I'm going to put it above the Polybloods. Okay, next. This team has several good value Pokemon. So Skeledirge, Torkoal, Farigiraf, all very good value. Breloom basically makes it so that you have to bring, like, you either have to bring Terragrass or Safety Goggles or, like, Lumberry on pretty much everything that you want to avoid having be put to sleep. But for the most part, it's just a whole bunch of good stuff. Like Crocodile I used last season. It's pretty great. But then Skeledirge, insane value, really bulky. One of the big things with this team, though, is that it does have so many weaknesses. Like ground especially. The only Pokemon that don't, like, kind of just die to ground are Tropius, Noivern, and Breloom. But, like, a lot of these Pokemon are weak to ground. Another thing, Fairy, somewhat, especially some of these, like, more primary Pokemon. Noivern is also weak, but, like, having Dragapult and Crocodile weak too. Fairy, and then these two also sharing a weakness in a Ghost type. And it's just very, very good against some types, but very bad against others. I think Ice is another one to worry about. Like, all three of these are weak to Ice. Clodsire is weak to Ice. Tropius is weak to Ice. Noivern's very weak to Ice. I would dare say Dark types are also a big issue, because you get Skeledirge and Dragapult and Farigiraf all weak to Dark. It says Dragon types here, but that's just because it's, for the most part, neutral. I don't think this team is especially weak to Dragon types, especially since Fairy Skeledirge is fairly common. But I think overall, it is a very good team. I think there are some great utilities, like utility Pokemon, like Farigiraf with it's like anti-priority stuff. I think it's a great Trick Room setter, one of the best in the format. I think Toxicroak is a pretty good fake-out mon for the points that it is. I think overall this team's kind of lacking in access to fake-out. I can't speak on that because mine is too, but like at the same time, I don't think Toxicroak is as good of a fake-out mon as you kind of need if you're just running one. Haze, running Clodsire and Quagsire is pretty silly, but outside of that, it's not great considering they both have such low stats. I mean, they're good and unaware and having Water Absorb, but they kind of fill a very, very similar role. And I don't even think that role is necessary on this team. So, yeah. I don't really know what this team does very much. Like, best thing I can come up with is just Torkoal setting Sun for Tropius to get Chlorophyll, but even then Chlorophyll Tropius isn't very fast. I think it can only outspeed like base 100s, 110s or something. Like, it's pretty low speed to start off with. I had it last season. Torkoal is very slow, but the only Trick Room Mon on the team is for a Giraffe. Yeah, I think it's kind of like difficult to pinpoint what this team is going to do because not many Pokemon, unless you run like supportive Dragapult, like dual screens Dragapult with like, I guess it lost breaking swipe, huh? So like dual screens Dragapult with like Torch Song, Skeledirge, Intimidate Crocodile, and just kind of hope that that can spam and break through is an option. Something like Scary Face or Thunder Wave Dragapult is like honestly probably the best speed control outside of Tailwind Noivern, kinda. Also, I forgot about Noivern when I was talking about Tailwind before, but it's really frail too. It's not the best at setting it up. Frisk on it is pretty good though. Like Frisk and Tailwind is good utility. It's pretty weak though. But then I guess you can also kind of spam Boom Burst with these two, which is kind of interesting to think about. But all in all, some pretty glaring weaknesses. Not a real clear way of getting speed control or playing the game in general. But I think Torkoal is very bulky. I think there's a lot of potential for bulky stall teams running some unconventional sets like Screens Dragapult maybe. But I think all in all, the team kind of lacks a little bit of cohesiveness. And so for that reason, I'm probably I'm going to put it BC tier. I might move it at the end whenever I get through. Oh, my team. Hooray. Yeah, no, my team's the best. No, I'm just kidding. Roaring Moon, incredible value. It's got great Tailwind. It's immune to Prankster stuff. It can be taunted, but who cares? Or not can be taunted, can be faked out, but who cares? Just run Protect. Heatran, very good, especially with Roaring Moon. Can go into Tailwind and be very bulky, and Roaring Moon gets Breaking Swipe, Throat Chop, Jaw Lock to keep things in on Heatran, or on any of these Pokemon, for real. And then it just does so much. It gets Fast Taunt, Booster Energy, basically makes it a priority Tailwind, who only loses to priority Tailwind, and there's not very many in the league. But yeah, just a very strong Pokemon. Can be run supportively, can be run bulky, can be run very offensively. It's just a great Pokemon overall. Heatran, same thing. It's incredibly bulky for a strong, like 130 special attack Pokemon. Like it's very, very intimidating, and you can run so many different things. It only has, I think, 3 weaknesses, like ground, water, and fighting. And with terrestrialization, you can get rid of them. I think it's a very strong Pokemon in an open terrestrialization format. And I think it is really good with Heatran, and especially some of these later picks like Dusknoir and Stantler, who can also set up Trick Room with it. It's very middling speed, which means you can kind of run it in either mode. Same thing with Sylveon. You have to invest a little bit more in speed on Sylveon because it's something that, yeah, base 60. I mean, base 60 isn't bad. Base 60 is pretty middling as well. It's just you have to run a little bit more investment if you want to run a Tailwind, and you don't really have to in Trick Room. So it's pretty good. But overall, it's, I think, one of the best budget fairy types. Like I think if you're not going for Fluttermane or one of the Enamorous ones, I think that Sylveon is by far and away the best fairy type on the draft board. And even then, I think it does some things better than those. Specifically, it gets one of the strongest spread fairy moves. So if the opponent's very weak to fairy, kind of like my team is, but like a lot of teams last season were very weak to fairy, and Sylveon just being able to apply that pressure, being able to use Pixelate, Throw Spray, Hyper Voice, just launches a ton of powerful attacks, and Terra Blast. It gets boosted by Pixelate, and it's stronger than Moonblast with it. And then you can also Terrastalize with it and get the stab boost of a different type. So either way, it's not like you're running normal type Terra Blast and like losing stuff. Like Sylveon is very strong in and out of Terra, and I think it can do a lot of different things. It can even run Charm and stuff, and I think it gets dual screens. It's pretty bulky, like 130, 95, very specially bulky actually. And if you invest in defense, it can also run Just like a bulky set. I mean, there's so many different things it can do, even with this limited move pool, which I think is great. And it completes a fantasy core, and I think this is by far and away the best fantasy core out of any team in this league. So I think these three are very, very strong together. Serena is an incredible Pokemon, especially for the value, in that it blocks priority, and it's very strong physically. And like Heatran and Sylveon, it can be run in Trick Room if your opponent's really fast, or it can be run in Tailwind extremely well. Very good speed tiers. I love the 70s in the Tailwind because it means it outspeeds like everything in Tailwind. Like it would outspeed Greninja. Like it's kind of stupid. A very strong, very, very, very solid coverage. So it gets a lot of different moves, and it gets mostly just high attack moves that kind of have low accuracy, but it's not so low that you can't run like Wide Lens and expect to hit every time. So you get to like 99% accuracy with Wide Lens on a Pokemon with base 120 attack that blocks all priority moves, and it's decently bulky too. It's overall very strong. It's kind of like for a Giraffe and just blocking priority stuff, but it means that certain Pokemon cannot necessarily fake out. Like next to Roaring Moon, you can't fake it out anymore. So now Roaring Moon is basically guaranteed to get Tailwind up. So yeah, I mean it's just very strong for the points. Like I think it was only 6 or 7, like 6 or 7 maybe. It is good value. Greninja was 4 points. I picked it up. It's great, especially with Mudsdale. I'm so glad that I got Mudsdale this season. I think it's a very valuable Pokemon for like 6 points. Inner Focus, immune to Intimidate. Stamina, great with Greninja. Water Shuriken, with like weakness policy stuff, or there's all sorts of things. Greninja can be run as a fast support mon, or it can be run kind of offensively if you give it like something to boost its attack stats. Like you can run like Choice Band or Choice Specs, or you can run Focus Sash stuff with some supportive moves. Overall, I just thought it was amazing value for 4 points, so I wanted to pick it up, and it gives my team decent enough water coverage. It's actually one of very few water types that gets a decent water special attacking move. Specifically, it gets Water Pledge, so you don't have to rely on Hydro Pump hitting, which is very good. And it's also immune to Prankster stuff, which is very nice. Kind of doubles up on the dark types, but it's not really an issue, especially considering I have Clefable. And then, yeah, just all in all, it's a very good Pokemon. Now, Palmot I thought was also great value. Having Fake Out, having Encore, having Revival Blessing, having strong electric type moves, close combat, double shock. It's just very good, and it's fast, and it has Fake Out. It's actually my only Fake Out Pokemon, but unlike this team, I think, not this team, maybe this team. No, unlike this team, kind of like this team. Like the Fake Out Mon here is Toxicroak. I think Palmot's much better if you're just depending on one Fake Out Mon. I think Palmot has a lot more versatility, and you can do a lot of different things with it. Especially with Encore stuff, Fake Out stuff. It's got so many different tools and decent enough stats to utilize them. Pretty good speed, especially in Tailwind. And it's got a high enough attack that like you can't just ignore it. Because you kind of can with Toxicroak, just because its typing isn't the best. Or you can just like one-shot it with a Psychic move. You can't necessarily do the same with Palmot. Its defenses are pretty weak, but you can run Sash on it. You can run, pretty much anything you want to make sure that you can get your moves off. Invest in bulk, maybe. Like, there's just several things that you can do. Like, you can even run Assault Vest. Like, I'm not saying it's optimal, but you can run Assault Vest and get, like, Fake Out, Double Shock, some of the Elemental Punch moves to get coverage. There's a lot of different things it can do, but I think overall it's just a very good support mon and a very strong Fake Out user. especially for 7 points. And I think that it gets some unique stuff with the Revival Blessing that will make a lot of these Pokemon very happy, especially Clefable, because like if I bring Clefable and then some other Pokemon that I really want to stay alive, and then I use like Clefable and Follow Me until by the way, I don't know why this doc doesn't say I have Follow Me or Ally Switch. I definitely do. But you know, Follow Me until Clefable dies, send in Palm Off, fake something out, use another move, then Revival Blessing and protect with the Pokemon you want to protect until next turn, and then Revival Blessing Clefable, and then get Clefable back onto the field. Which means you basically get another turn of protection for free. It's just very strong, very, very good potential for things that you can do, or like Serena. Like if someone kills Serena, it's like, okay, well now I can start using my priority moves. Now like Palmot brings Serena back, and now Serena gets sent back in, 50% HP, and can help protect any of these Pokemon. But I think it's all in all very good. Clefable is incredible value. I don't know why this thing was 5 points. Look at all of the support moves it gets. Plus it gets Follow Me. I don't know why it doesn't say so. And it gets Ally Switch, so I also don't know why it doesn't say so. At least I think it gets Ally Switch. It gets Knockoff for some reason. I don't know why this thing gets Knockoff. But it's pretty crazy. Double Screens, Icy Wind, Thunder Wave, but Encore, Follow Me, Helping Hand, it gets Helping Hand. How about instead of Rage Powder, we put it Helping Hand. Oh, I guess I also don't have Helping Hand, apparently. Okay, oh, never mind, yep. So it gets Helping Hand. It's just overall very strong, supportively. And it can grab things away from Heatran and Roaring Moon. In particular, it resists fighting, so Heatran can cover that. It isn't weak to ground, which means it can cover Heatran for that. It resists fighting for Roaring Moon as well, and it resists, or it doesn't resist, but it's not weak to Fairy, which means it can redirect those away from Roaring Moon. Sylveon, it kind of just doubles up on weaknesses, but at the same time, I don't think this is a very common duo. It may be if the team is very Fairy weak, but if it's very Fairy weak, then I'll just bring the Fairies, so you don't need the resistances. But overall, just incredible support mon. Dusknoir, this thing is outshined by Dusclops, but it should not be overlooked. Like, this thing was, before Eviolite came out, I'm pretty sure it was one of the premier Trick Room setters, just because it was immune to Fake Out, so it's still immune to Fake Out. It gets Frisk, so I can identify sets. It gets Knockoff, it gets Poltergeist, it gets Will-O-Wisp, it gets Ally Switch, it gets Trick Room to set it up, it gets Taunt, it gets Haze, it gets Icy Wind, it gets Pain Split, it gets all sorts of everything that Dusclops get, and more. And it's a little bit less bulky, but not significantly less bulky. So it's a very, very useful, very strong. It's not quite as slow as Dusclops, so it can't really abuse its own Trick Room as well, but at the same time, you can run something like Choice Band Poltergeist, and it's threatening. And it also has some neat things with Heatran that I won't spoil. But it also just works really well as a Trick Room setter. And it doesn't have to use Eviolite, so like you can use Mental Herb and block a Taunt, and now you're immune to Taunt and Fake Out. So you pretty much always get Trick Room up since you're so bulky. Another big Pokemon that goes with that, and with Clefable, is Snorlax. So Dusknoir can set up Trick Room for Snorlax. Clefable can redirect, so Snorlax gets a Belly Drum off. Snorlax gets so many moves. It's a very supportive Pokemon in the sense that it can have extremely bulky Yawns and helping, I'm not sure if it gets Helping Hand or not, but there's several support moves that it gets, and it can also be an insane setup mon. So it can be very strong in that regard offensively if your opponent isn't ready for it. And even without setup, in all honesty, 110 attack is not bad. So if you invest into like HP defense, you are incredibly bulky. If you invest into attack, maybe defense, same thing, you're incredibly bulky. There's so many different ways you can run Snorlax just by default because of its high base stats. Because like I mean, with how low its special attack and speed are, these other stats are perfectly fine. Like defense, yes, you will need to invest in defense pretty much every week, but at the same time, you have an insane HP stat, pretty high attack stat, and a pretty great special defense stat. Like this thing is a specialty defensive wall. We were talking about Goodra earlier. It's about as bulky as Goodra. Yeah, and it has the same highest attack stat too, I think. So it gets like 110 special attack. Yeah, and Snorlax is 110 attack. So just very strong. Mudsdale, I am so glad I finally got this thing. Very strong. Like this stat spread is absurd, especially if you run Assault Vest. I mean, 125 attack that can't be lowered, or you focus on stamina and have the 100 defense that gets boosted by Greninja. It's just a very strong, very bulky ground type that's very hard to deal with and can be amazing in Trick Room if Dusknoir or Stantler sets it up, or it can be pretty decent outside of Trick Room if it runs like some stamina stuff with like, you know, boosted body presses or other moves like high horsepower. It gets access to high horsepower, which is a 95 base power single target move, which makes it stronger than Earthquake and doubles. Like it's just a very, very strong ground type, especially for the price, and it works well with Greninja and Clefable. It's just, there's so many things that it does well that all in all it's just a very strong Pokemon, and it makes my team less weak to Intimidate. Because Snorlax is pretty weak to Intimidate, Roaring Moon's pretty weak to Intimidate, Serena is pretty weak to Intimidate. And Palmot can be, but like you're mostly using it for support. But Mudsdale's immune to Intimidate. And it was kind of better than every competitive user or, you know, anything that's really anti-Intimidate, I guess. But at the same time, not many people in the league have Intimidate. Not everyone does. But I do with the final Pokemon, Stantler. It gets Intimidate, it gets Frisk, it gets Sap Sipper. Mostly you're going to be using Intimidate, but this could be useful against some team later down the road if someone picks up Amoonguss. Frisk, kind of, Dusknoir just does it better. Also, Pressure's a good ability on Dusknoir. With how bulky everything on this team is, I have been, like, thinking about some, just protect stalling and let the opponent use up all their moves with Pressure, and it's just, it's interesting. It's interesting. Because, I mean, a lot of things, like, if you run, like, close combat or something against Snorlax, you just, like, send these two out, let them use all of their close combat, or not, maybe not these two, because no one's going to use close combat on these two. But, like, you just let them use all their moves, like, Snorlax, you know. I mean, you only have, like, 4 times to use close combat if Dusknoir is on the field. So, like, Dusknoir Snorlax, it's very threatening, even if you don't dress like Snorlax. Several things there. But Stantler, just pretty bulky overall with Eviolite. It's immune to ghost types, which is nice for some matchups. Intimidate's just always good. And most importantly, I think it's one of 2 now, just because Weirdeer exists, but I think it's just one of 2 Pokemon that gets Intimidate and Trick Room. So I think overall it's pretty good. And it gets what is the, like, ability swap? What is it? Skill swap. You get skill swap as well, so it's pretty useful. Thunder Wave, kind of good. Helping Hand is good. It does some things good. I mean, it's 3 points, and it gets dual screens too. So you can run, like, dual screens, just have Intimidate, make everything here bulkier. Heatran, like, it's just very strong. Like, these 4 plus Heatran plus this, or Sylveon, or Roaring Moon as a late game sweeper, or Palmot for fake out, like, it's all very strong Trick Room stuff, but then at the same time you have these 3 and Serena. It's like these 4, Palmot, and like Clefable. Like, you have very good Tailwind stuff. Like, it's very versatile. You can run Trick Room or Tailwind. That's like the whole premise of this. Very similar to my last team, where it's like either fast Sneasler or slow Trick Room stuff. And so I think overall, I think that gives me a lot of versatility. And for that reason, I think my team is very good. I think it's top 4. So the big thing is, I think a lot of teams in this league are very strong and I think there are four S tiers, and I think mine is here. I think it's under the Polytoes just because this core is so strong, but I could easily see it being this way too. But I'm gonna put it like this for now, just to be humble. Welsh Rubets is very interesting in the fact that it has Vinanet. But the Welsh Rubets, they're very strong in the sense that they are very centered around sort of some Sableye stuff. Empoleon's great anti-Trick Room. Great Tusk is very strong in general and gets Photosynthesis boost from Ninetales. Komao is good, but normally likes redirection. Like, I think this team would have killed to get Clefable, to be honest. Or Clefairy, but mostly Clefable just because I don't think I can afford it. Moltres as a Tailwind setter is pretty good just because it's decently bulky, but it's very weak to certain types, and it's not very versatile in the things that it does. It kind of just gets Will-O-Wisp, and I guess it gets Taunt. Will-O-Wisp, Taunt, Tailwind. Not too much else outside of being decently strong. It's 125 special attack. Boosted in the Sun, I mean, those fire type moves can be powerful, but it's good value for where it's at. Shift Tree is good with it if you wanted to run Wind Rider, but Ninetales also has good Drought with it, so you can run Chlorophyll instead, but you're kind of weaker and you don't get the attack boost, but it gets Fake Out, so that's good. Sableye also gets Fake Out. 3 Fake Out mons in this team, which is very scary, but at the same time, Sableye and Morpeko aren't the most intimidating Fake Out Pokemon, and Shift Tree's not good into every matchup. You can kind of just run Protect into this team. But overall, Great Tusk, Moltres, Empoleon, if your opponent has Intimidate, and Komao seem to be the primary special attackers. Sunflora is obviously the strongest Pokemon with Solar Power. Just run some like Trick Room Gardevoir with Solar Power, Sunflora with Ninetales in the back, Room Service or something with Solar Power, Choice Spec Sunflora. It'll work, trust. And then Gardevoir's pretty good in the sense that you can run it next to Great Tusk. You can run it just because it gets Telepathy, which means it won't be hit by Great Tusk Earthquakes. So really you can run Great Tusk, Shift Tree, Moltres, Gardevoir, and never have to worry about Great Tusk hitting yourself. Technically Sunflora too, but at the same time, I also kind of think that it just dies to an Earthquake anyways, but it's funny, so. Yeah, Haze on Empoleon is nice. A lot of Taunt, but at the same time, like, you don't want to run Taunt on Komao. You don't want to really run Taunt on Moltres. You can in some situations, and it could be useful. But primarily, you're going to be running like Prankster Taunt if you are going to be running it. Yeah. Overall, I mean, there's no real like standout threats outside of, you know, these two. But at the same time, there's not a whole lot of shared weaknesses exactly. I mean, like, yeah, it says, you know, ground and flying are big weaknesses, but at the same time, Moltres is very good. Shift Tree's pretty resistant to anything that wants to use ground anyways. I think overall it's very strong. I think it's the most balanced team. I think it's like upper... I think it's like a low A tier. I think I'm just gonna kind of plop it down. I think it's high B, low A. I'm actually gonna put it low, or high B right now. So the next is this team. This team's actually incredibly scary. I don't like Broop on it at all. I think it, in the sense that it just is very strong. So this thing obviously, oh, no Encore apparently, but it does get Spore. Spore, please. Thank you. So it does get Spore, which is very good. But at the same time, it's not limited to Spore, so it can do a lot of different things with it. Iron Moth is very good if you run booster energy stuff. You can run booster energy with like acid spray to lower the special defense by 2, or you can just run it offensively. It's 140 space special attack, 110 speed. It's just very, very strong. It is very weak to ground, but at the same time, there's so many ground resistances, and like you're not really going to be bringing ground into Excalibur or Thunderous. Just doesn't work very well. But then Gotharita's interesting. It's decently bulky with Eviolite, I guess. I mean, yeah, it's decently bulky. But primarily it just fakes out, protects one turn, and then you hope you live. Does anything get Perish Song on this team? I actually don't know. So, let me make sure I don't mess it up. So this thing, it's good in the sense that it traps the opponent, and it's good that it is so low cost for such good value. But really, I don't know what all it does if you don't run Perish. But I think my Lodic might have Perish Song. But I can't see here. But overall, I mean, very solid. Like, Excalibur with my Lodic to drop, like, prevent Intimidates, Defiant Thunderous, or Prankster Thunderous, both are very good. So it's very versatile as an attacker and as a support mod. Conkeldurr is insane value. It shouldn't have been that low. But it's very strong in terms of just being able to hit things hard with Sheer Force or Guts Boosted or Iron Fist for like Mach Punch and Bullet Punch stuff. So like I think, in all honesty, this is the team that will give I think this is the team that'll give like the NYL the most trouble. Just because it can deal with Fluttermane effectively. It can run Excalibur into the Ursaluna. And the Tauros can't really do too much about it, because my Lodic's just so good. Yeah, I think it's just very strong. I think all around, I mean, Florges behind Sylveon, but easily the next best fairy type. It's even cheaper, but it's good value. Its abilities are kind of eh. But at the same time, Flower Veil next to Brute Bonnet basically means that Brute Bonnet can't be burned, which is also nice. Staraptor's good. It gets Intimidate, Final Gambit stuff, Tailwind. It doesn't have incredible speed, but at the same time, 85 HP Final Gambit's pretty strong. So you can get rid of a lot of Pokemon with that. Iron Treads is good overall. There's not really anything that it does amazingly, but its typing is solid, and it's just very, very capable of running different items. You can run Assault Vest or Choice Scarf if you wanted to be funky, or Choice Band, or you can run Clear Amulet, or you could run Booster Energy if you don't want to run it on Iron Moth. Several different ways you can run this thing. It's very strong. Not like super oppressive offensively, considering it only has like, what, yeah, 112 attack, but it's pretty strong. But Conkeldurr and Excalibur, I mean, they make up for it. And Brute Bonnet, oh man. So all in all, outside of Iron Moth, very weak on the special end. You know, Florges and like Thunderous even being your next best special attackers, as long as your opponent doesn't have like Intimidate, is not the best. But at the same time, it has so many tools to prevent Intimidate and things like Will-O-Wisp, like for Florges, and I think Excalibur is immune to burn, maybe? Or maybe it just doesn't like lose its attack stat. I think overall, I mean, it's very strong physically, and there are so many different ways of blocking Intimidate that I think you have to be worried about it anyways. But at the same time, you can also kind of just bring Reflect, and it'll be harder for them to break through. But overall, I think this is, especially with the Iron Moth trade, I think this is one of the best teams in the league. So I kind of redact my statement of saying, well, this is just so linear compared to everything else. Oh. This is so linear compared to everything else, so I think I'm going to actually move this down to high A, like I was discussing before. Put this team. It's hard to say. I think just because it's got so much potential into intimidate stuff and it's so strong that I think it's actually probably the best team in the league. Yeah, it's a very, very strong draft. Now this is actually interesting, just because Shroodle and Poltergeist. I mean, Shroodle's got Prankster, but man, I don't know too many situations where you would want to bring either of these Pokemon. But Landorus, Ursaluna, Chien-Pao, Urshifu, Pelipper, I mean, and then Oranguru to like instruct Ursaluna to do a bunch of like hyper voices and Trick Room or something. Like it's the whole team is these Pokemon. Like, yes, you can run Willow stuff for like screens. Rotom Fan is kind of just the worst out of the Rotom ones forms, except for regular Rotom. And then these two don't do much at all, except for a little bit of redirection, but its bulk just isn't good enough to support that. But they're both 1 point, so. But these two are pretty decent. But the main thing is it's all this team. Like, it's very difficult to break through this core of 3, just very strong physical attacks with Tailwind support. Intimidate, I mean, obviously the best Intimidator in the game right now. And Ursaluna Oranguru is a very strong combo as well. So it gives you multiple modes that you can run, but it's all pretty much these 6 Pokemon. And for that reason, I think it's very similar to this team. In fact, I think it's a little bit better. So I think I'm actually going to put I'm going to put them here. I'm going to put them like that. But I mean, going back to what I was saying before, like, it's very, very linear. You pretty much only want to bring these 6 Pokemon. Versus, like, Matt's team, you don't know what he's going to bring. Or my team, there's so many different modes. Or, I mean, this, you also don't know what they're going to bring, but for different reasons. And this, like, different Trick Room mode, Tailwind mode, bulky stuff, but it's very similar to this one, and the fact that it's just very, very linear, but very good. Very, very solid. And so I expect them to do well, but if someone finds a trend of like how to beat this core, you're going to have to make some trades. And otherwise, you know, just adapt along the way, I guess. But it's very vulnerable to finding a weakness and just pushing through with it. Like, especially these fairy types. Like, if you have a strong fairy type, it breaks through all 6. Like, Fluttermane is very good into this, because I don't think if you can like invest into Fairy Fluttermane or something, into Chien-Pao and Urshifu, like, it just one-shots everything pretty much except for Ursaluna. And so that's pretty good. But it, you know, it's a good team. Is it better than the Politoads? Iron Hands is just so good. But Landorus Therian is also good. I think this team's a little bit. I think they're about even, but I think this team's slightly better just because it's got a couple more things that it can do. This is another scary team. It's very weak to ground, actually. My goodness. Incredibly ground weak, but you get Levitate, so I mean, for the most part, you don't really want to run it into Altaria or Bronzong, or, you know, maybe Sinistra if you're trying to sweep through everything with a ground type. But at the same time, these two Pokemon aren't very offensive, so if you see them both on the same field, like, they're not doing anything. And grounds otherwise are very strong into the rest of the team, except for like Tauros. But even then, you just bring a Pokemon that can beat Tauros, and you kind of just win. So it can be very difficult to defend against ground types with this team. But I do actually love Typhlosion Hisui. It's 2 seasons in a row that I've looked at it. It's very strong. King Gambit's very strong as well. Having that Defiant is so good, and if your opponent doesn't have Intimidate, you can just run Supreme Overlord. And it's just a very strong attacker. Like, how much attack does it have? Yeah, 135. It's very strong. Iron Thorns is also interesting, because I think it's very suboptimal, but I'm pretty sure that you can run it with enough speed and like minimum special or like minimum attack or something that it gets a speed boost if you wanted like Thunderwave Taunt supportive Iron Thorns eventually. But beyond that, it's just kind of there. It's ground weak, and then Sinistra's very strong with this team specifically because there's so many different ways of it being bulky. With Bronzong, these three, and these three. So Sinistra being able to heal those Pokemon up and strength sap itself up is just very strong, especially with Hospitality. I guess that's exactly what it does, but that. This is arguably one of the best Intimidators outside of like Landorus or the Arcanines. I would argue it's the most consistent, but also the most boring, in that it probably just runs Wave Crash, Close Combat, Aqua Jet, and like Protect or Terra Blast, depending on if you're running AV or not. It can do different things, but or maybe not Wave Crash, but Raging Bull. You know, maybe swap the two depending on what you need. But it's also just very consistent. Monkey Dory though is very interesting in the fact that it gets fast, fake out, and parting shot. So it's kind of like a mini Persian and a tiny little Incineroar, but it gets strong special attack and decent typing. So I think that's nice. And Frisk is a good ability too. And the risk for Toxic Chain to poison a Pokemon, like I think it's badly poison, but like poison a Pokemon and then have so many bulky Pokemon that can just kind of wall there, like sit there and wall it while it dies is very valuable. So I think this is a good pickup. I think Altaria is just good into weather. I don't really actually see it doing too much outside of that, nor do I really think you even want to bring it into weather, just because Cloud9 is like, it's good, but I don't think it brings enough value outside of that. Maybe outside of Tailwind to really justify bringing it in a lot of matchups. So I think it's okay, but Revavroom can be very strong, can do some swagger, mirror herb stuff, which is very nice. Maybe Monkey Dory gets swagger. I don't know. Does it get swagger? Well, guess I can check. But it's pretty decent. Iron Thorns we've talked about. Darkspan is very like it's a good fairy type. It's probably the next best after Florges, but like it's a steep curve of like Fluttermane, Sylveon, like it goes Fluttermane, Sylveon, Florges, and then like Darkspan's like way down here. Like it's not the best, but it can be very bulky, especially with a big body. So you can run something like Typhlosion if it gets a whatever that fire move is that like spreads the whole way. Maybe Flareon gets it. I don't know. But it can be bulky, but it's not the best. It just doesn't have the stats or anything to pick up. I mean, especially I didn't know it had such bad HP. It doesn't have good attack. Like it's going to try to body press you, and that's about it. Bronzong though, much better Iron Defense body press Pokemon. Very good Trick Room setter. Very good for King Gambit, Sinistra. The Levitate is amazing for the team because it really needs it. You could skill swap it onto things with Bronzong, which is very nice. And Flareon, just in general, is pretty good, especially with Guts. It gets Trailblaze, so you can do some stuff with like Trailblaze boosted Guts with Facade and Flare Blitz or something. But overall, it's pretty solid. And then the Albuquerque Appleton. Oh, shoot, I have to rank them. I think this team's pretty solid. I think it's got some clear weaknesses, and I think it does a lot of things well bulkily, but I don't think it does anything superbly. But I also think it's one of the most balanced teams, with like Choice Scarf eruptions or Shadow Balls or something, or just whittled down with like Monkey Dory, and then like this signature move that burns opponents. I think either burns them or poisons them or something. I think just overall it's pretty good. So I think we can, what is it, the Prismatic Ice Shards? I think we can put them at a low A tier, just below these two, just because even though even though it's so versatile, I don't think there's anything that stands out to me from this team that's like, wow, that's threatening. But at the same time, that may be to their benefit. In all honesty, all of these three are pretty even. These two because they're so centered around one strategy, and this one just because it's so balanced, but like in the best way possible, I guess. So really, I mean, it could go anywhere in A tier. Like this one's a toss up. This one's kind of ordered, and these two are what they are. You know, I think this is a good place for the Welsh Rubats. But then the Albuquerque Appletons are a scary team because they have Dozogiri, which can kind of be abused, but at the same time, you have to prep for it every week, else you get beat by it. Tornado Therian is good value as a Tailwind setter, has amazing base stats, and Regenerator. And Annihilate, Klefki, and Sneasel with like beat up to boost Annihilate. Klefki to set up screens for Annihilate, to set up some prankster stuff. Annihilate's just very bulky and can do a lot of different things. Sneasel's good fake out. Probably not the best to only have it as the only fake out one, but at the same time, it helps with Colossal a lot. Inner Focus makes it immune to other fake out, which is nice. Not that there's really many fake out Pokemon that are faster than it in the league, but it can just run Focus Sash. And Klefki's good because it gives screens and Prankster Thunder Wave and can do Prankster Weather stuff too. So it can do. I know it gets rain. I don't know if it gets sunny day, but it gets Rain Dance at the very least. So it can Prankster Rain Dance to do something. I'm sure. These two, it's like two, technically two, and then Dugtrio, which just traps. So like for 1 point, Dugtrio is very good. You can also do like weak armor stuff. I mean, this Dugtrio also gets beat up. So it's like these three, Klefki, Sneasel, and Dugtrio, are all good with Annihilate. So it can all boost him up. And then Sneasel and Dugtrio are both good with Armor Rouge. Can weak armor stuff. Indeedy's amazing with Armor Rouge, obviously, just for size spam, redirection, consistent Trick Room getting set up. And, I mean, there's several good slow Trick Room ones, but also Annihilate is fast enough. I stand corrected, Annihilate is not slow. But Annihilate is good in Tailwind, Dundoza is good in Tailwind, Colossal's very fast outside of it, and Armor Rouge is very good in Tailwind based on its base speed. So a lot of solid stuff. There's a lot of different Trick Room setters, a lot of different modes of play, and I think for that reason, I mean, there's nothing that really is like stand out to me. Like in general, if you have water and electric types, or like a ground type for these guys, you kind of destroy a lot of the team. Yeah, so I think if you have like water, electric, ground, and then something for Annihilate, it's just very, very easy to break through. So I think for that reason, it's probably above these teams that are very like one core focused, like this one and this one. But at the same time, I think it is not necessarily better than these teams in the sense that these teams have so much more that they can do without being reliant on 2-2-2 strategies, and they don't have as many weaknesses. Like, man, this is like a perfect like type combination thing. But like, yeah. So I think just because it has so many type weaknesses, I think it's better than these, but worse than these. So I think it's like right here. We're right here. Well, let me look at mine again. I may be wrong. Yeah. No, just because there's so many different modes that it can run. There are different modes here, but they don't work super well together. Like, Dundozo Tatsugiri doesn't really want to be with Annihilate, and it doesn't really want to be with these two, because then it's like, if it's 2-2 like this, it's very, vulnerable to ground and electric types, and it's just not very strong in general, because you got two very frail Pokemon. a Pokemon that can boost itself, yes, but I mean it's kind of locked into being one Pokemon versus two, and is weak to Haze. This one's also weak to Haze. I mean it's very Haze. Yeah, like you can't bulk up as much with this with Haze. It's just not as good together as a lot of the teams in the S tier are. But at the same time, you cannot overlook a lot of these two kind of deals. So yeah, I think they're very strong. And this team is, I said that it was top 3, but actually after looking at a lot of these, I think it's actually kind of similar to this team. I think Thundurus is good and consistent. I think Rillaboom's good and consistent. I think the rest are not. So Politoed is great because, I mean, you get the Rain Core with Tailwind. So, like, you get Basculegion, these 4, and maybe, like, Infernape or Gothitelle for Fake Out. And Gothitelle can trap things. I think it's very weak to Ghost types. You can bring a Ghost type, not get trapped, because Ghost types are immune to Shadow Tag, and just kind of be okay, because like, you're not going to bring Greedent against Ghost types. I think Ghost types hit things for very neutral here. I think the team's weak to Flying as well. These 3 being weak to Flying, this one being, most of them being neutral against them, and then Thundurus being the only Flying resist. Yeah. So, I mean, it's very weak into that. I mean, you can Terrastallize out of it, but overall, like, Thundurus is very offensively threatening, Rillaboom's very offensively threatening, Basculegion is too, and Infernape can be only if you run, like, Life Orb or Choice stuff. Maybe Fortress if you count, like, Explosion. Terra Normal, Normal Gym, with Prankster Tailwind, maybe. But not really, because it's, like, 40 base speed. Yeah. I think for the most part, you're kind of, like, Arbok is a good Pokemon for, like, its value, but not a great Intimidator. So overall, I don't think that the team is very standout threatening against a lot of stuff, unless you are really weak to Electric, Flying with Terra Blast, Water moves with Basculegion, Ghost type moves, or Grass type moves with Rillaboom. But I think Tailwind with Rillaboom, with like strong Wood Hammers, Tailwind with Thundurus, with, you know, strong electric moves, and, you know, part of the issue with Thundurus Therian is just that it doesn't get great coverage without terrestrializing, but it is also fine. And then it gets even better with Politoed. And Basculegion Politoed is good too. So I think for the most part it's kind of stuck in Rain. And I know Braylen Boy said that you didn't have to run it with Rain, but you don't really want to run it any other way, just because, like, these are your, minus Basculegion, these are your other Pokemon. I think there's just a lot of investment in the Rain and Tailwind mode that doesn't work outside of it. Like, you can maybe get away with, I don't know, a bare bones Trick Room mode with Gothitelle as your only Trick Room. Yeah, it just doesn't work great. But this Rain Core is very good. Rillaboom's very good. Thundurus is very good. Basculegion's very scary. So I think the Rain Core alone, I think, kind of puts it. What is the Prismatic Ice Shards? Yeah, no, I don't think that the Rain stuff is more threatening than some of this King Gambit Sinistcha stuff. In all honesty, I said it was top 4, but there are so many good teams in the league right now that I think I have to put it like here or here. I think I'm gonna put it here. So overall, very strong draft though, because like this looks very decisive, but every single team is, like, you know, much more squished together than it appears here. Like, all of these are pretty much even. And then this one's very close behind them. This one's kind of close behind them as well. This one's a little bit farther down, but, like, you know, top 3. This one's closer to these ones, in all honesty. I'll probably, I don't know, I'll put it here. And then these 2 are just top tier. But at the same time, like, they're so close to these that it's it's hard to differentiate between them, especially since it depends so much on matchup. So overall, I think that's kind of where the power rankings sit for now.